Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper. And there's been something on my mind lately that I wanted to share with you all because in the preparedness community, we often give advice and suggestions to those who are in more urban environments to relocate to rural environments in order to be safer, to avoid urban decay, and to have more access to self-reliance. But in some situations, that might not work out the way you think it will. And there's a lot of challenges living rurally that aren't often discussed when that advice is given. And although I agree with the advice, and I have said this many times in the past, that getting out of the cities is a good idea, there's a lot of things I've learned through personal experience that make this life much more difficult, and people don't necessarily set you up for that when they're just telling you to go move to the country. It sounds great, and it is great. And here I am on my own range, on my own property that I clearly enjoy. But at the same time, the obstacles of living out here aren't easy to overcome if you're not prepared for them all. And to be honest with you all, I wasn't necessarily prepared for how much effort, energy, and financial resources it was going to take to maintain this property, to get things up and running in the sense of self-reliance and sustainability and everything else related to that. So I want to talk about that. And I also want to talk about the fact that you don't have to live in a rural environment to be prepared. I've seen this been going around lately where people are talking about how, prepping by just storing enough supplies and having backup equipment and stuff for an emergency isn't actually prepping. And the only way you're prepared is if you have a farm and you can live off of your own labor. And I don't agree with that either. So first off, let's jump into the rural discussion, okay? Listen, I moved out here. I have over 20 acres, a nice property, I have great neighbors, and I live in a nice town. So I'm not complaining or trying to make it seem like a bad deal. I'm living the dream of many people out there, especially having my own shooting range, which I know a lot of people would love to have. But when I moved out here, I put a lot of energy, resources, basically my heart and soul into ensuring that I could get a decent sized property with a house large enough for my family. And in doing so, I limited the additional resources thereafter that I had access to with plans to just scale over time. But here we are, I've been here 4 years now, and I still don't have a tractor or a skid steer or all these other things. And now people are gonna start commenting about financial responsibility and better planning and all that kind of stuff. But that's just not necessarily how everything works out because things just don't go the way you want them to all the time. But if I were to do this over again, I would have budgeted to have money set aside for a bobcat, skid steer, or some sort of large industrial tractor so that I could actually get things done around the property in a more efficient way. Today I was out working with my trees that I planted, which we have about a 94% success rate right now, which I think is actually pretty good considering all I did was auger holes in the ground and drop little sapperlings in those holes, and they survived the winter, and here we are with like 94 trees still alive. So I'm pretty happy with that. But regardless, I'm working with those trees. Then I had to go deal with a bunch of overgrowth and brush and everything else in another part of the property. And I just don't have all the right equipment for all of this. So it's causing a lot of extra work, a lot of extra effort. And I just am not in a situation right now where I can just go buy a skid steer or a tractor. But people will constantly tell you if you're not out here in a rural environment, you can't be prepared. And so you need to move and relocate. But the problem is that they're not giving you the additional information or the caveats about all of the resources and all of the additional breathing room you're going to need in order to properly maintain your rural environment. So, like I said, I'm not complaining. I'm trying to be realistic with everybody here to let you know that you have to want to do these things, which sometimes I don't. Look, I'm not a farmer. So being out here, I'm like, this is a lot of work and I'm not sure I even want to do it all. But like I said, I'm still going to do it and still trying to do it because I think it's the right decision. But there are times where I'm just like, what have I done, right? But at the same time, if I had 50 grand right now just to drop on equipment, I could spend all of it and probably still not have everything that I would like to have in order to do everything I need to do. So that's just something you need to be aware of. Moving rural is a good idea, but if you buy a big property and you spend all your money on said property and the house there within, which is basically what I did, good luck getting all the other stuff you're gonna wish you had 4 years later. This might sound like obvious stuff to people who are like born in rural areas or who have lived on property their whole life or have inherited property or anything like that. But for people like me who grew up in a suburb scenario, this is new, right? Everything I'm doing is new, and it's just a lot, right? Be upset if you want. I don't know. I'm just trying to tell you the truth and trying to give people a level of understanding other than just saying, hey, move to the country. You're stupid if you live in the city or the suburbs because you're going to die. I don't necessarily believe that. And I also want you to just be aware of like what, what it all, entails. So now here's the other thing. And of course, guys, I really could use your support. So if you appreciate what I try to do here on the channel by trying to get people better prepared and you just like supporting me, then please hit the subscribe button, the like button, and all that stuff because it does help. And I'm really bad about saying that, but I'm trying my best. So let's move on to the next part of the conversation. You aren't prepared if you live anywhere other than like where I live right now. I don't agree with that either. You can be prepared in a suburban house. You can be prepared in an apartment. You can be prepared living on the side of the road because it's all you have and it's all you got right now, right? You can be prepared because you're at least putting plans into place that will help you through some sort of predetermined issue you might encounter. And don't let people tell you otherwise. Look, I lived in Florida for the first 20 years of my life. If everyone in Florida was farming because they needed to be self-sustainable in order to be prepared, and then a hurricane comes and you have to evacuate, how is that helping them be prepared? It doesn't make a difference if you live on a farm or in a house at that point, you still have to evacuate, right? And the same thing can be said about just preparing for normal disasters. Most scenarios aren't going to last a super long time, and you need some water, you need food, you need backup power and lighting and things of that nature. You need communications and the ability to keep them up and running. But in general, you're probably going to be okay unless something catastrophic occurs. And in those catastrophic scenarios, yes, being out here is going to be highly ideal. And I definitely recommend it, even with all the stuff I just told you. Regardless, this is still definitely the best place to be in the sense of preparedness for any type of scenario. Maybe not in Minuteman missile silo territory, but that's a different conversation. So I don't want people to be discouraged from being prepared just because they don't live in the country. But I see this conversation occur regularly where people will tell you if you're in the city, you're dumb and there's no point for you, right? And I just don't agree with that. A lot of things can happen that don't equate to total societal collapse where people are coming after you and it's the purge, right? There's a lot of things that can occur where you're in your apartment or in your house and you just, buckle down and access your water and access your food and stay put for a week or two and things improve and then you're fine. That's general preparedness. And having additional supplies on hand and having food and water and batteries and all that basic stuff stockpiled is totally prepping. To tell people it's not just because they're not raising cows or raising goats or whatever else it might be is ridiculous, because now we're just gatekeeping preparedness from the sense of like, hey, having some extra things on hand is a good idea. No longer is that a good idea, right? So I just want to have this conversation because first off, I've been getting my ass kicked in this property lately. So I just wanted to make sure everybody who was considering moving rural was kind of mentally prepared for that. It's not as easy as it sounds. You don't just get to move out here and sit in your house and do nothing. Like, it's constant work. It requires machinery that I don't currently have, so everything takes longer and it's harder to do than it would be otherwise. And of course, I have plans to try to get that stuff, but life happens and things change. And I took a giant financial hit this year where a lot of those plans were literally laid out for, hey, here's how we're going to get everything up and running, and here's how we're going to get the equipment, all this stuff. And then in the blink of an eye, it all changed, and now I'm just back to square one, having to hit the brakes and wait till I recuperate. That's just the way life works sometimes, right? But regardless, people should be prepared for that before they just evacuate to the rural environment. And then the same thing can be said about staying where you are because this isn't for you, or you don't necessarily have the resources to like make something like this happen. Don't be discouraged. Great. Okay, store some water, store some food, get some stuff, have some self-defense, do some stuff that you enjoy, or you might have to travel a little bit to experience it, but at the same time, you still can go back home where for most emergencies, you're going to be okay as long as you've done some preparation. And that's just the reality of it. So I don't know if this is just like me ranting because I've had a hard day or if I just wanted to really help those people who maybe feel like they're failing or that preparedness isn't even worth trying to achieve because of where they live or their current situation. No, it's achievable by everybody no matter what situation you're in. And if you are going to move to the country in order to be better prepared and enjoy, what property and everything else can provide you in the sense of more self-reliance and privacy and everything else along with it, then just be aware of all of the challenges and everything else related to that before you make that move, and then maybe ensure you have resources set aside for all the additional costs that you're going to incur. That's just what I wanted to do. So anything that you have in the sense of advice or suggestions to people, leave it in the comments below. Or if you've felt this way before, please say something. I try to respond to quite a majority of the comments, a lot better than a lot of other people on YouTube, at least from my experience. So I'm happy to try to, walk you through some stuff, or at least just say, hey, you're doing great, whatever. But I think it's great for us to share some of these personal experiences with everybody because I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to put on some kind of a show here for everybody. I'm literally just letting you know how things really are. And sometimes people get upset with me about that. Not really sure why, but uh, because it's my experience and not theirs, right? So let me know if you've experienced that feeling that it's not even worth trying because of your situation. And let me know if you've moved to a rural environment from like the city or the suburbs and then suddenly realize like, holy crap, like I don't have what I need for this to work properly. And that's just the reality of it, but it's okay because you're still in a good spot, I'm sure, but it's still something you don't hear people explaining or trying to let people know about before they make this like big life-changing decision, right? So anything else you need from me at all, go to magicprepper.com. There's a lot of ways to support the channel there, as well as just some other interesting information. So make sure you check that out. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.